Hello, and welcome to another Cambly live session. If you guys can hear me, send out a hi in the chat box. Tell us where you're from. We want to know where you're from. A big welcome to everyone that is here. If you've been here before, if this is your first time, let's see where you're from. Say hi. I see someone from Hungary. Someone is counting down. I see some hellos. Say hello. Send us a hello. My name is Teacher Darryl. I am a teacher here on Cambly, and today is another of our Cambly live sessions. If this is your first time, Cambly is a great platform where you can have some one-on-one tuition conversations with many tutors, depending on your needs. I'll explain a little more later. And later, I'm also going to be giving a discount code, so stay till the end. Let's see. Oh, I see people here from Pakistan, from India, from Romania, from West Papua, Bangladesh, Thailand, Japan, Sri Lanka, Nigeria. Welcome, everybody. All right, so what is today's lesson about? Today, we are looking at IELTS. I'm sure you guys all that are here know it is the English proficiency exam. And today we are looking at passive voice for writing. So it's an important way in your writing to add complexity, to try to get that higher mark, that higher band. So what are we doing today? We are going to go through first the basics, just to make sure that everyone is using passive voice correctly. So we're going to look at the actual basics of passive voice. I've got a nice formula here that I created to make sure that we can use it correctly. Then we're going to look at, again, in a general sense, when do you need to use passive voice? And why would you use it in IELTS, which I'm sure is why you guys are here. Also, very important, we are going to be looking at things to avoid specifically for the IELTS writing section, and common mistakes. Now, mistakes are important to realize because they can work in the opposite in your band and your grade. Instead of giving you a higher band, they will bring you down because they are written in the wrong way. So that is very important. And of course, we're going to look at some actual examples on how to use IELTS in task 1 and task 2. And today is a interactive lesson. I will also be giving you some exercises to do. We will be stopping at least twice to go through those exercises. I'll give them at a certain point, and then later when we stop, we can go through them. And also, if you have any questions that relate to IELTS passive voice writing, please send them through. I'm sure other people have the same questions and they would appreciate the answers. All right, so let us start straight away with the basics of what is passive voice. Now, a lot of speaking and a lot of writing tends to happen in active voice. So this is like a very simple example, but it shows what we mean. The subject is first, and the subject is doing the thing to the object. So a basic subject, verb, object sentence. She eats the apple. She is the subject doing the verb, whether it is present, past, or future. She is doing it to the object. And of course, the object could have a pronoun or a possessive or an article. So that is a very simple sentence. It's active. Now, passive, we kind of switch this around. We take the object and we have it acted upon by the subject. So it is a very different way of talking. It's not active. It's not something that's happening. It's passive. We're talking about the object and how it was acted upon. Now, let's take a look at the example and then go through the formula. So the example I've taken from she eats the apple to the apple is eaten by her. Straight away, we can see that the object has now become the center of the sentence. It is all about the object and not the subject. So let's look at the formula. Object plus, and I've put here a modal verb. Now, often that can be forgotten, especially in writing. You can leave out the is or the should or the would or the has been. And that can really affect your sentence. And that is something you want to avoid. So that is why I have included it here as part of the formula. So the object, the modal, the verb, the doing word. And I've written here, this is a past participle. So this is not the usual past tense verb. Some of you might know this as verb 3. This is the past participle. See the difference? Eats and eaten. It's very important. We don't use ate. We use eaten, the past participle. And then we have commonly a preposition, which again, a lot of people tend to leave out. I want you to remember you might need a preposition to show the relationship between the two. We will look a little bit at some common prepositions later. So here it's by. And finally, the subject, which has now become her, obviously not she. So this is the basic passive formula. You may not always need a modal. You may not always need a preposition, but they're there so that you remember that they need to be there. And I said I was going to give you guys some exercises. So let me do that straight away. Now we're going to stop in about 5 to 10 minutes, and then we're going to go through the exercises. So please, when you know the answers, start sending them through in the chat, and then we can go through them. So let's take a look. I'll leave these on the board, don't worry, but I'm going to read them out to you. So the student cleaned his room. Both of them watched the show, and he is looking at the garden. So I want you to send through what you think the answers to these three are, changing them into passive voice. And I'm going to leave this over here at the top of the board. All right. Now, we've looked at the basics. Let's now look at the common mistakes that happen. Again, why is this important? Because a lot of people want to use passive voice to increase complexity, to increase variety. But if you use it incorrectly, it will work against you. First common mistake is that passive only works for transitive verbs. It does not work for intransitive verbs. To those of you that have studied grammar, you know the difference, that there is a list of intransitive verbs, and obviously everything else is transitive. What does it mean? Let's try to make it a little simple to understand. A transitive verb can accept objects. So it can basically think of it as doing something. It can accept objects. An intransitive verb cannot accept objects. I will give you an example. Let me make some space here. So let's look at a sentence. They arrived at the room. They arrived at the room. That is obviously active voice. Now, if we change this, into passive voice, it will be the room was arrived at by them. Now, it sounds okay. It sounds okay. Ooh, my board is moving a little bit here. Hold on. So it sounds okay. The room was arrived at by them, but arrived is an intransitive verb. And if you listen to that, there's something a little off about that. The room was arrived at by them. It's too complicated. It's too many words. We've got two prepositions next to each other, and it doesn't feel right. So this is why it's very important to know which are transitive and which are intransitive verbs, make sure that in the exam, you know, if you're going to use passive voice, that you know this verb works for passive voice. It is a transitive verb. So maybe you don't want to learn the whole long list of things, but know which words you can use for passive voice. Another common mistake are prepositions. And it's been a bit cut off there by the video. I'm going to write it again. Now, what does this mean? There are certain prepositions we need to use depending on what the object and the subject are. So it's very important if you're using certain subjects, you've got to think about what do they do? What is their relationship to the object? Let's look at a typical example. So water, or let's say the water filled the cup. Again, very simple example. And if we change this to passive, it becomes the cup was filled. And now instead of saying by, this should be with water. With water. Why? Why? Because the cup is inside. It's being filled with water, not by water. Water can't do anything. Water is not a person. Water is not a being that is capable of filling the cup. If we say this cup was filled by water, it implies the cup is actually, the water is actually doing something. So you've got to be careful about that. And yes, it is a common way that people, natives, talk, but in the exam, you want to have the best grammar possible. So you must be careful about that. Water is not a person. It's not a being that can do something. So it's filled with water, not by water. In the same way, if we have, and I'm just going to go straight to passive, if we have the book was written, and we're talking about a person, this has to be by, let's just say the author. So I can't say with the author or in the author or at the author. This is by, because this is a being. It's a person that can do something. So the next mistake, like I said, is to make sure that you check your prepositions. You check what the object is and what the subject is and what can do what. All right, so we've looked now at passive voice. We've looked at the basics. We've looked at the common mistakes. We've looked at transitive and intransitive verbs. I want to take a trip to the chat to see who has sent the answers and to see if there are any questions. So I'm going to go to the chat. I hope you guys have sent the answers to the first exercise. So let's take a look. So we're looking for the student has cleaned his room. Both of them watched the show. He is looking at the garden. I see someone, his room was cleaned by the student. Yes, that's right. So Fatma, I may pronounce this incorrectly. I apologize. Nirbati, well done. All right. The show was watched by them. Z King, yes, very good. Well done. His room was cleaned by the student. Yes. The garden is being looked at by him. The Pierre Puya, very good. Well done. I apologize if my pronunciation is incorrect. Let's see. The room was cleaned by the student. Well done. Wararat Sirubin Yachai. And the room was cleaned by the student. The garden is being looked at by him. I see a lot of correct answers. Sylvia Sukiyu, the show was watched by both of them. Very good. I see people are watching from the Philippines. Nice. Thank you for coming. All right. And are there any questions so far? I don't see any questions. Remember, if you have any questions, please send them through. So let's look at the answers. I'm going to write them up properly. Although in the chat, you guys can take a look. There will be another exercise I'm going to give you after this, so we can take a look at the next little break. So the answers are: his room was cleaned by the student, because it's the student that does it. The show was, there's our modal, watched by both of them. And the garden is being looked at. Now here, in this one, the garden is being looked at. The garden is being looked at. I've specifically left off the subject. I'm not saying who is looking at the garden. And I've done that for a reason, because we're going to look now at reasons why you would actually use passive voice. And then we're going to jump into why you would use it for IELTS. And here is your next exercise. So again, I'll leave it on the board, don't worry. So the dog chased the cat. He is drinking some juice, and they dived into the river. So for the next break, please send through the answers for that, and send through any questions that you might have. All right, so let's talk about why you would want to use passive voice, when you need to use it in terms of English. Now, the first reason is the subject might not be known. So let's look here. The garden is being looked at. Now, I said in my example that he was looking at the garden. I don't know who he is. I could say by him, but what if it didn't tell me that? What if I don't know if it was a him or a her? What if I don't know the name? I can just leave it like this. This allows me to have a sentence that works without having a subject. The garden is being looked at. It's a perfect sentence, but we don't have a subject. So if I don't know the subject, passive voice is my only way to go. Another reason I need passive voice, or I can choose to use passive voice, is when I want to focus more on the object. So let's look at this one. I want the show to be what we're talking about. By making the show the first word and changing the order of the sentence, I am making this the center of the sentence. This is what it's all about. So if you want to emphasize the object, you use passive voice. The show, whatever the show was, is the most important thing here. And we're going to talk about that for IELTS as a way to connect reasons or examples, and to connect your paragraphs together by making the object the important part of the sentence. All right, and another reason that we might use passive voice is maybe we don't need to mention the subject. Maybe it's not important. Again, let's look over here. The garden is being looked at. I don't know who the subject is. Maybe it's unimportant, and I don't need it. It's not adding anything to this unless it's a story about the person. So if I don't need the subject, if it's not important, I can leave it out and use passive voice. So those are the times when you need it. Let me say them again. You want to make the object the center of the sentence. You don't know who the subject is, or the subject is unimportant. There are probably other uses as well. Of course, this is English. But those are the main reasons I use passive voice. Now, why would you use passive voice in IELTS writing, specifically in task 1 or task 2? The first obvious reason is to add variety, to add complexity. If you can change your sentence around, make it a more complex sentence, you are going to get a better band. If you can have variety in the way that you change things around and your sentences change and there's variety in them, again, you're going to get a better band. Also, and this I'm going to write down because it's an important thing to realize. One thing you are being tested on in the writing is your cohesion. Now, what does cohesion mean? Cohesion is how your paragraphs and how your statements fit together. And cohesion, by not having a cohesive set of paragraphs and not going in order, it can affect your band. And by using passive voice, we can sometimes make our sentences much more cohesive, make them flow very nicely, which makes a good read, which gets you a better band. Why else would we need to use them in IELTS? Let's look at task 1 and task 2 before we look at actual examples. Task 1, what do you have? We have the graph, we have the pie charts. This is obviously the academic IELTS. So for the academic IELTS, you have the pie charts, you have the line graphs, you have the process diagrams. And we're going to look right now at how to use passive voice for process diagrams and to add variety to describing the graph. And that's why you want to use it a lot in task 1. It's really going to help you. All right, let's take a look. So I'm going to draw a very basic diagram here, which could be from any task 1 academic IELTS. And I'm just going to draw a diagram of cement. And we're going to say that this is a vat. Obviously, your diagram would be much bigger. But this is a typical part of a diagram you could get. They show you part of it, and now they ask you to describe it. Now, we could go with the obvious way that active voice of saying the cement is tipped into the vat. Actually, that's passive voice, which is exactly what I'm saying. You need to use passive voice here because we don't know who is doing this. We don't know who the subject is. There's no part here that helps us. So I need to use passive voice. I need to talk about what is being worked on here. The cement is going into the vat. So I don't know who's putting it there. I don't know how it got there. So I have to start with the object. The cement is poured into the vat. And it actually makes it seem so much simpler now to describe this process. Because again, a lot of people don't use passive voice. They try to use active voice, and they say somebody or a machine, but you don't know if a machine is doing this. You don't know if a person is doing this. You can't say the foreman or the manager pours this into the vat or the machine does it, because you don't know. And by saying that you think you know, you could be affecting your band. So we have to use passive voice here. The cement, the object, which is the important part of this, is poured into the vat. You can use that throughout the whole process diagram. This is done to this. This happens to that. Because again, you might not know who is doing it. Of course, don't use only passive voice. Active, passive, you have a whole diagram there. The vat does this, the machine does that, depending on the diagram you are given. So that is the first way to use it in task 1. Now let's look at another way to use it. I'm going to draw a quick little line graph. Now, you know, you get a pie chart, you get a line graph. This is not the best one, I do admit. But let's say that is 2007. This is 2005. And we'll just say this is goods. Now, why do you want to use it for this kind of task 1? Because you want to add variety to the way you write. There's a common tendency to say there is an increase, then there is an increase, then there is a boost, then there is another increase. And it becomes a little bit boring to always say the graph shows an increase or there is an increase. So sometimes you want to switch that around a little bit and talk about the object. the actual increase itself. So instead of saying the graph shows an increase, we can say an increase is shown by the graph. So instead of just talking about the graph shows an increase, the graph shows a decrease, the graph shows this, the graph shows that, you want to look at it from the object's point of view, the increase, the decrease. It is shown by the graph. It's a small change, but again, it adds variety to your writing. So that is another way to use passive voice in task 1 to try and get that better band. Now, before we move on to task 2, I want to go through the answers here. So I'm going to come to the chat and let's take a look. All right, so some juice is being drunk by him. I see it straight away. Very good. Some juice. We could even take out the sum if you wanted, but this is good. An increase is shown in the graph. Now, I see someone has answered the river was dived by them. And I'm going to tell you straight away that this one at the bottom, they dived into the river. This is a trick question because this is an intransitive verb. And we know that an intransitive verb does not work with passive voice. So yes, we could easily write it. The river was dived into by them. But again, it doesn't sound right. We've got into, by, two prepositions next to each other. It's an intransitive verb. So this one, they dived into the river, we shouldn't change. We should leave this as active. Obviously, you can try, but it's an intransitive verb. We should leave it as it is. All right. And let's see. The dog chased the cat. The cat was chased by the dog. Thank you, Corrine Livingston. Some juices. The river was dived by them. I see a lot of people have tried that. I'm glad that a lot of people did that so that we can highlight. Don't do this in the exam. Don't write the river was dived into by them because it doesn't sound right. It's not right. So be very careful about that. All right. So let me write up the proper answers for them, and then we can move on to task 2 and how you can use passive voice to add some complexity to the writing, and we'll also look at a few mistakes. So this is the cat was chased. We could say is chased, will be chased, was chased by the dog. Some juice is being drunk by him. And the other one, we leave as it is. We can't change it. It has to stay as they dived into the river. All right, so now let's look at task 2 and when you want to use it. We've already looked at task 1. Now, I want to talk about how to use it for cohesion, like we said, to add that complexity, to add that cohesion to your writing. And I have something written here. So let's look at this sample that maybe came from someone's task 2. And it says, a possible solution to obesity in children is to make high-calorie foods hard to obtain. Schools can remove these foods. Now, there's nothing wrong with these sentences. These sentences are perfectly fine. But by changing the voice from active to passive in this second sentence, we can actually make this flow so much better. Let me show you. It's like a magic trick. Okay, here we go. So what have I done? I'm going to read it again. A possible solution to obesity in children is to make high-calorie foods hard to obtain. These foods can be removed by schools. So you see straight away that I've connected the end of this sentence with the beginning of the next sentence. This really makes this flow a lot better. And then we can carry this on. We can say schools can do this and then have this cohesive flow happening all the time. It's a simple technique, but it's very, very important. I'm going to put both of these onto the board so that you can take a look at them. All right. And now let's look at some common errors that happen when writing. When people are using passive voice in the IELTS writing, and they shouldn't be. Now, this sounds like, why do we need to do this? If we can use passive voice, let's use it. But remember, you should only use it under certain circumstances, when you don't know the subject, when you want to highlight the object, when you want to add variety, but you don't want to add words for the sake of words. So again, I've got some prepared things here that I want to take a look at. And this is common stuff that people do that they think it's adding complexity, but sometimes the examiners, when they look at this, they think this is someone that's just adding words. This is someone that just wants to add complexity for the sake of adding complexity. So be aware of these common mistakes. So here again, we've got something that could be in any IELTS task too. Research conducted at the university found that. So it's a lot of words. It's a lot of words here at the top. And it adds to your word count. But does it really need to be in passive voice like that? Let's consider just saying research found that. It's simpler. It's more straightforward. So be aware of common mistakes like this, adding extra words in passive voice for the sake of. Let's look at another example. So again, something that people often write, it is believed that. And again, there's no reason to make this into passive voice. We can just say some believe. Active, simple, straightforward. So you're not getting anything from making this passive. You're adding a couple of extra words, and you're making it sound more impressive, but be careful of that. Only use passive when you should. And the final example, and this could be from a task 1, it can be seen on the graph. And again, it's a long, complicated way, and it's not adding anything. We could say according to the graph. All right, a simpler way to say it. So be aware of all these little areas where maybe you're using passive voice incorrectly. Again, I'm going to put these on the board. So you guys can take a look. And I'm going to go again to the chat just to see if there's any other questions. I think we've covered quite a lot today. All right, if you have any questions, send them through now. So someone's asked, can you explain intransitive verbs one more time? Okay, so let's talk again about transitive versus intransitive verbs. So a transitive verb can accept objects. Let's think of it as it can do something to objects. So we could say, we had some examples here. Where are they? Chased. The dog chased the cat. So chase is something that happens. The chase happens to something. Let's think of it that way. It can accept an object. It chases the dog. The dog chases. The other example we had was they dived into the river. Now, dived is intransitive because it can't accept an object. What dives? It doesn't. You don't dive something. You dive into something. So the dive doesn't directly work on something. You need this middle preposition to something happened. We also looked at arrived at as an example of an intransitive verb. And what does this mean? Again, you don't arrive something. I can't arrive the table. I need this middle preposition. I arrive at the hotel. I arrive at the table. So that's a simple way to think about it. If the verb can't directly do something, then it's not transitive because it can't directly affect those objects. That was a good question. Thank you to whoever sent that. All right. I think we've covered quite a lot here. Thank you to everyone that has joined us today, everyone that participated in the exercises, everyone that sent questions. Like I said, I will explain a little bit that Cambly is a great online platform that you can use on the web, you can use on your phone to chat with tutors just like me about anything, whether you are preparing for IELTS, you want business English, conversation English. It's a great way to speak one-on-one at any time you want with a range of different tutors. If you want to speak more with me, please check out the link in the description below. We can do grammar, IELTS, anything you need. And as I promised you, we have a special IELTS discount code, which I'm going to write on the board, and it should be in the description below. So let me write this down. All right, so it's quite a long one. It is IELTS right. IELTS right. I'm not sure of the amount of discount that is available for that, but please go check it out. Start learning straight away. Go have a good rest of your day. Keep safe. Thank you for joining us. We'll see you again on another Cambly live session or a Cambly static video. Bye for now.